Hello and welcome to In the Clear, the only show envied by bears for its ability to hibernate for up to 3 winter months. I'm your host, Tom Stark, and boy is it good to be back. We had some personal matters to attend to over at the show, but everything is fine now. And we are back to deliver our special brand of condescending help to the internet. A side note before we begin, I'm a little hoarse as you can hear, but we still decided to film today because the show must go on. Now, without further ado, let's see what we have lined up for today. Mr. Volt swung by for an interview recently, which was particularly exciting for me, and we spoke to an actual pilot for building a better world this week. Before we start, remember to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. It really helps us out. Now, let's get to it. That is Mr. Volt. He makes some really insane builds of tech from popular media. He's made tech from Portal, Fallout, and Futurama, just to name a few. He recently sat down with me to talk about some of the ins and outs of how he does what he does. We really hope you enjoy this interview.
So I'm here with DJ, also known as Mr. Volt on YouTube. Hey DJ, how you doing?
Hey Tom, pretty good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for asking. So I just wanted to ask you a couple questions about what you do and how you do what you do, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
All right. So you make things, and some of them are quite elaborate as far as, normal maker standards for channels on the internet. Um, but particularly you make things that are from popular media. And I wanted to ask you how you go about choosing the things you make. Like you do Portal, Futurama. I've seen Fallout. I know you're a big Fallout fan.
That's right. I mean, the biggest thing is, uh, making things that you love. Like, I wouldn't really
Hmm.
be super motivated to work from a franchise that I have no relation to, even though I've got a few of those in the background, because I'm trying to strike the balance between, the Venn diagram of things that I love and things that people want to watch too.
Yes, yes.
So in the past, it's predominantly been just things that I really, really want.
Hmm.
Because a lot of the videos I've done over the past few years have actually been for another company, another channel, Element 14 Presents.
Yes.
But over the last year, I've focused on my own stuff. So now I'm trying to find that perfect YouTube balance of am I happy and is the audience happy?
That is the eternal struggle.
Yeah, that's how I choose.
On that note, is there something that you've made entirely on the I don't know this, but I'm doing it for the views end? And did you end up liking it after the fact?
Um, Not yet. I'm
Not yet.
actually going to start. I'm starting that project this week, and it's not a secret. It's a series I never watched. It's an animated show called Ben 10, and a
Mm.
fan actually reached out to me last year, and he asked me help to build, because one of the iconic pieces of technology is like a bracer
Yeah, the
watch that you wear.
Omnitrix.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm familiar.
Are you familiar? Okay.
Yes.
Um, uh, and I mean, that's the thing. I never watched the show. It just was just outside my interest and range. And so I know nothing about it, but he'd done tons of research and sent me a bunch of things and asked me for help. And I he basically told him no, because like it takes a long time to build certain gadgets. But
Yes.
the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a tutorial so that he can have one and anyone can have one.
See,
That's
that's awesome.
yeah, that's the intersection, because that's really fun. And I particularly like wearable gadgets. I haven't
Hmm.
done something like that in a while. I've actually got, it's funny. I've never made a game accurate version, but I've made several Pip-Boys over the last over many years now. It's kind of like, I don't know, just an ongoing love affair, because it's such a wonderful gadget and so monstrously complex at the same time.
On top of making that wearable particularly, I feel like it's just a little bulky would be one of the challenges you face. It's just
The
based on
Pip
the type of
Boy or the
technology.
Omnitrix?
The Pip-Boy.
Oh, the Pip-Boy.
Yes.
Yeah, thankfully it's quite a bit clunkier. I don't know if you've looked into it before. There's actually another guy who I've actually become acquainted with. His name is Zap Wizard online, but he's like a proper industrial designer, and he's been building
Okay.
a fully functional game accurate uh, to Fallout 4. I think the 3000 Mark IV version with full custom internals, and it's insane how detailed it is, because obviously in the game world you can model whatever you want and nothing has to exist in the real world.
Yep.
So it's been really exciting seeing his journey through that. So I've gotten a little catharsis seeing him go through that, because I'm focused on so many other things. So my Pip-Boy dreams are paused while he works on that. Maybe I'll
Shelved at
just
the
build his
moment.
version someday. Yeah.
That's actually really interesting, and I'm going to be checking him out after this because I'm not
Yeah.
familiar.
Oh yeah, the main thread is on the replica prop forum if you've looked
Gotcha.
around there. Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask, I know you're self-taught. You recently put out a shop tutorial video and answered a lot of really cool questions that people have been asking, and that was one of them. But in your self-taught journey, where was the point where you built your first thing that worked out well enough and you decided, like, this is what I want to keep doing? I love doing this.
That's a good question, because it's hard to say. I've been like tinkering since I was like a teenager.
Hmm.
I think the first completed project I ever did was my very awkward looking, and it's still on my channel. The very first video I've got up is a box version of the Pip-Boy.
Hmm.
So my attempt at a Pip-Boy 2000, and that was the first time I'd ever like sat down and be like, okay, I'm gonna make something. I'm gonna try and plan it out, choose all the parts. And that was really fun, because it was something that I had designed and follow through, and like people liked it, which I was surprised, because it's so far away from any sort of canonical representation. But they're just like, oh,
Yeah.
that's cool, that's interesting. Plus it was really challenging. Like I learned a lot about programming and just like fabrication from that, because it was outside of my skill set, just barely.
Hmm.
So that I think was one of the first big motivators, was that first Pip-Boy build in 2011. Yeah.
Wow, we have passed 10 years on that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, aside from it being an awesome build and, learning a bunch in the process, I'm sure must have been really cool. I think a lot of the
Mhm.
poll, like you said, you were surprised people were really about it.
Mhm.
I think people like personal spin on things, as far as I've noticed anyway. Like, it's very nice to be able to recreate something accurately, but when it does something new or
Right.
unique, or it's like an homage to something you really love, it almost seems to gain as much pull.
Yeah, that's something I've really enjoyed, but also struggled with, because it's like, if I'm trying to replicate something that has a fan base, people are aware, and it's really amazing. I love getting to the comments, like with my Wheatley build. People have pointed out really small
The
details
mhm.
that I'm like, I know, like, unless you're staring at this model very accurately, you're not going to point that out, because it's not a feature in the game. So people really pick up on the tiniest details, which I appreciate, because usually it's nothing too, it's not like, you screwed this up. It's just like, oh, I noticed that you added a seam at like this one weird hidden plate inside the chassis. I'm like, that's absurd for you
You're
to
like,
notice this
why are
too.
you looking there?
Right, yeah. But
Uh,
that's the other thing too, is a lot of people are also doing this as well. So I'm not the only one trying to build these kinds of things, for sure.
I- very true. I think
Yeah.
like the recent influx of 3D printing has opened up the world for a lot of people in this way, myself
Yeah.
included, but it it's much more accessible to most people, and I love that you're always telling people like you can do this too, and there's a way to start out and look, and I think it's literally easier than ever, especially that. And I know you've also said you could just look up anything on YouTube, like, how do I do this, how do I do that? It's such a nice tool.
Yeah. What machine did you pick up, or do you have one?
I do. Ender 3 V2. I bought it originally.
Solid.
It is solid. It's working really well. I'm still finicking with it. It's not as plug and play as everybody wants it to be, but I almost feel like that's a nice part. When something goes wrong, you can diagnose it, you can solve it. This is a new problem you've worked through.
Absolutely. Like that's once you tear apart a machine and rebuild it to any extent, you understand at a deeper level. Plus, I've worked with a lot of 3D printers. I've owned a lot of 3D printers, and I've seen results from the Ender 3 that are just as good as a $20,000 machine, you know?
Oh my God.
Like the drop off is pretty steep in terms of like quality to cost, because this
Mhm.
was just like industrial hot, commercial technology very recently, and it still is in a lot of ways. So it's just been locked behind patents, and the fact that it's so dirt cheap in comparison,
Mhm.
it's amazing that you can just take a file and have it in your hand hours later, or
It
minutes in some cases.
Yeah, with the very small prints.
Hmm.
All right. I want to know personally, is there a project you haven't tackled yet because you don't feel like you're up to it?
That's kind of where I'm at, in the sense of,
Hmm.
with the GLaDOS build, she's she's really, at the end of the day, not that big. Like
Yeah.
it is an awkward sort of animatronic, but like, compared to like someone working on a car, like that's relatively huge. I just don't have the physical space for something like that. So when I started her, I didn't know what the how the the path up the mountain. I didn't know how I was going to get there. So
Yeah.
that was really one of the most recent ones where I've been like, I don't know. And I definitely had to redesign a lot of things because my intuition and whatever skill set wasn't there for certain elements. But there are definitely, I'm trying to think of what I've got in the slate that I want to try. Um, I really want to do like an elaborate Doctor Octopus costume
Ooh,
that
that
has
would be
some sort
awesome.
of like really articulation, but that doesn't look weak. Like if
Hmm.
it wobbles, or if it's made of foam, you're like, that's clearly foam. Like I want it to spin or twist or something, but have a moderate scale. And like that gets really hard really quickly, because I don't know, just the forces involved are a lot. It's a lot to
Yes,
deal
they
with.
are.
That's a really challenging one from the mechanical side. And from like a software and like physics side, I started this and I put it on the back burner, because I'm just focused on other things. Is I really want a Securitron from Fallout
Hmm.
New Vegas. And that gets into just like wanting to have like a mono-wheel robot platform, and the math and physics behind that is
Are
really
insanely difficult.
challenging. It's insanely difficult. And people have built balancing robots before, but like little toy versions that are like maybe
Hmm.
a foot tall. So it gets a lot more complicated if you want something that's like 3 feet tall and might weigh 40 kilograms.
Yep.
So I've been breaking my brain occasionally trying to get into the physics of it. So that's going to be a really fun one, to work through. And uh, that's still something I very much want, because if I can crack that to where, okay, here's just like this inner frame of a monowheel robot. There's lots of monowheel robots out there that from pop culture that other people would want to build. So that's kind of like a platform I really want to push myself to figure out. But I don't know. I can't explain the physics well enough to teach someone else. So it might just be, hey, I figured it out. Here's the thing. You can download it. But I can't give you a lecture on exactly all the forces involved.
Which is again another thing I just found out from the shop tour. You did not go to school for any kind of physics or anything. You said Russian, right? Was your major?
Yeah, Russian
So
language.
I actually went to school for physics on like a weird twist of how this interview is going. But I'm I do enjoy building things, making things. I have the 3D printer. I love modeling and stuff like that.
Mhm.
The electrical aspect of it, I have not tapped into. Like what you're doing is blowing me away, but I could explain the forces to you. I think is pretty funny.
Right. You understand the more fundamental, electromagnetism.
Hmm. I know
Yeah.
why it works, but don't ask me to put it together.
And that's the thing too, is like I rarely get into like the real electrical engineering stuff. That's one of the biggest aspects that's more accessible now that I think a lot of people aren't as aware of is there are companies like Adafruit or SparkFun or Pimerone, just all these electronics companies that make a lot of breakout boards, and they have lots of ready to go software, well written libraries and things like that, to where you don't have to sit at a computer and, like, I don't know, write custom protocols and do lower level debugging and make your own printed circuit boards. You could just buy
Yeah.
this and then plug it in. You still have to hook it up, but you don't have to do the lower level work that used to be required and was a lot
Hmm.
more painful, even a decade ago. So that's largely where I stick out, mostly just for the sake of time. Like, as much as I would love to, really quote unquote build something from scratch, I'm just not very patient. Like, I don't want to wait 6
Yeah.
weeks to
If you have
have
shortcuts, you
something in
have
my hands. Like,
shortcuts.
I like working fast.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Plus, I mean, time too. Like, I'd rather spend $20 and get something that I know is going to work than spend 20 hours and there's
And
no
maybe it
guarantee.
doesn't.
So
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't. And there's a lot to learn from that. But especially now that I'm really going more intentional with YouTube, I have to make sure that things work,
Hmm.
or I want to. You know,
It's nice to see working things.
it is. Yeah.
All right. I have time for one more good question.
Okay.
All right. Let's go back to time. Like you just said, I know some of these builds can take from, weeks to months.
Mhm.
What is the build that you feel had the most, how do I say, like bang for your buck? Like, what did you do the quickest that ended up working the best?
Hmm. That's an interesting question. I'm trying to think of what that would be.
That's what I'm here for.
Because, right? I mean, Wheatley that I'm working on now is still not done. That's been 9 months. GLaDOS was also a six plus month journey.
Oh,
Um, I'm actually, well, not in terms of return, but in terms of I was fairly satisfied with it. I don't know. Did you ever watch the show Lost?
I didn't, but I know you have quite a few things
Oh,
from
okay.
Lost in here.
Yeah, so this is you can see it, well, actually, right there, that
Yeah, the
countdown timer.
countdown.
Um that one was surprisingly involved. Like, there's lots of detail work and a lot of components, but it I was able to get it working in a lot less time than I thought I would, considering how many parts that go into it. Plus, I was just satisfied with it. Um, that's another one I want to revisit. Just making split flap displays. It's a very
Hmm.
satisfying thing. Um, but I don't know. Even that, I'm not sure. I guess the real thing is I'm never truly satisfied with any of my builds when they're done, because I know everything that I was going to do and where I stopped. I do love a lot of them, but it's like, I know that I could have made something move or something light up, but
Hmm.
it doesn't. But you don't see that because I don't talk about it and say, well, here's what it could have done.
Yeah.
That's not very interesting. I'm just going to show people what it does. Um, so in that regard, I'm I don't know. Uh, I'm never satisfied, but I'm always content. If that makes sense.
I understand where you're coming from. I feel like it's a common maker issue. You're like, wow, this thing works and it looks amazing, but it works doing the one thing it does. Like, I wish it did this, I wish it did that. But at the end of the day, it's
Right.
still, I don't know how to put it either. it looks impressive to people who don't know, but to yourself, you almost feel disappointed, even though you're still
Right.
happy it's done.
Right. I
We need a
think the
word for
interesting
that.
thing too is like the more, I think this was with any creative aspect, is the more skills you have or the more, you know, ability you cultivate, your standards always rise.
Yep.
So you'll always want to do something better than what you can do. And if you look back, you're like, oh, well, I was terrible then. So I have to remind myself that it's like, okay, wait, I've made progress. Like I've learned skills. Like I didn't even know. So that's the thing. It's like I didn't know how to 3D model 10 years ago, and I only
Mhm.
picked it up, I guess, at this point 7 years ago. But it's been a slow process just learning these skills. It's like now when I'm puttering around my shop and I'm doing things, and okay, wait, I didn't know how to do, like CNC machine right here. I
Mhm.
didn't know how to operate a CNC machine 5 years ago. And like I have to take those sort of smaller wins of skill growth as opposed to like absolute, you know, project success.
Yeah, 100%.
Hmm.
And that is all the time we have, and I think a very good ending. Thank you so much again,
All
DJ, for
right, that
swinging
was so
by.
short.
I'm glad you think so.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
No problem.
He was fantastic. His builds are really cool to see. I'm a huge, huge Portal fan, and seeing GLaDOS and Wheatley in real life is pretty crazy to me. Also, the Pipboy video made me realize how much of my life I dumped into Fallout 3. I regret nothing. It was a real fantasy of mine to have Liam Neeson as my father, and I didn't want that to end for any reason. This rant is sounding sadder and sadder with every word, so I'm gonna move on. Joe and I actually have a good friend who is a pilot. We were talking to him about doing a bit on hypersonic flight. He said if we wanted, that he would actually come on and help us spread our wings as the worst flying joke I can make comes to light. So, here's our first Building a Better World with an expert.
All right, so everybody, I'm here with a pilot friend of mine, Jose. Jose, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
So, I just wanted to sit down and ask you a little bit about hypersonic flight. I know that's something you actually have some level of expertise in as compared to your normal everyday average Joe. So, first off, why don't you tell everybody what the idea is?
So basically, the idea is for those people who travel, if they ever get on a flight from New York to London, it should take them about 6 hours and 30 minutes to get there, depending on the winds, um, and then how
Roughly.
fast the plane goes, roughly around that. This project is meant for people to cut down that time. So it'll go from 6 hours and 30 minutes to down to 3 hours and 30 minutes, give or take the
Wow.
winds. So that's about a 50% reduction on time traveling.
Yeah, that's insane, actually.
Exactly. And basically, that being said, it's meant for those people who are business travelers. And it's supposed to help companies that send people out to London or to these places for business meetings, that instead of having to pay for a hotel for them to stay overnight, they can get on this plane, go to London, have your meeting, and then still come back that same day and still be home for dinner. Basically, that's what it's planning on doing.
All right, so I understand the in and out in the same day idea. Traveling is always much nicer when it's faster. Nobody likes their trip as much as they like the destination. Um,
Exactly.
that being said, this isn't something that's commercially ready yet, is it?
No. So the earliest thing that we've seen about this is with the Concorde. The Concorde was built back in the 80s, I believe, and
Mhm.
it was a supersonic. It was the first ever supersonic plane.
All right.
It flew for many years, but inevitably, unfortunately it suffered 3 to 4 plane crashes, which
Ooh,
made people's trust on it dwindle. Eventually, it being cut off from commercial service.
yikes. So, what do you think is going to separate hypersonic from supersonic in that realm?
So I think, especially with now in days that our technology has advanced way more than the 80s, we're looking
Very true.
at something that is going to change what aviation is going to be like. Instead of having those planes that take forever and use a lot of fuel to get to one destination, this one is being built or being designed as to be one of those planes that can get you to your destination safely, fuel efficiently, and it's a very nice thing that's coming out. That being said, with United being the first person that's partnered with this company called Boom, pretty much saying that we're going to take delivery of this plane and we're going to fly it if it meets our qualifications and regulations and everything that we stand for.
All right, you said something in there that I actually wasn't aware of. Is this technically considered more fuel efficient?
Yes. So
Wow.
knowing that today and days we have planes that can burn up to 20,000 gallons of fuel
I
on a
didn't even know
single
that.
on a single flight, it is built to be more fuel efficient because that is what the airlines are looking for, is more fuel efficiency. That's why we're seeing, if you ever heard of like the airplane called the 747,
Mhm.
it's being cut off from commercial service because it burns a lot of fuel. And the only people that are keeping the plane is our air carriers, for example, like UPS, FedEx. They're keeping those planes around just because they can carry so much cargo on it. But
Yes.
essentially, it's being cut off because it burns a lot of fuel per passenger.
Gotcha. So it's not actually almost worth it for even the airline to send it back and forth.
Exactly. That's why, at least in America, and we've recently been seeing this lately. I think a couple years ago, British Airways has cut their 747 commercial service from London to New York for a more fuel efficient aircraft like the 787 Dreamliner, which is more fuel efficient. It carries less passengers, but it is more fuel efficient.
Yes. Even at the passenger deficit, it burns less fuel based upon that. I get everything you're saying.
Yeah, pretty much. It burns less fuel.
Yes. And I did want to ask, I know we've spoken about this privately. There is some kind of ballpark idea of when this becomes available, right? Because it's not currently available, like we said.
Yeah, so exactly. So it's not available currently right now. They say that they're planning on rolling out the plane in around 2025, and then its first flight should be in 2026, with it having first commercial service in 2029. So pretty much by the end of the decade, we're going to see this plane take passengers. Hopefully, if there's no delays.
Yes. So what is the processing there? Like you just said, from unveiling to first flight, there's a year, and then until passenger, there's like another 3. What's the level of checking going on there? Is it all just safety
Yes.
checks?
So pretty much when any plane is rolled out or any like design of a plane is being rolled out, they have to do what's called a certification check. So they have to certify the plane. It means it's going to go through the ringer. So they're going to put it in extreme weather condition, in extreme heat conditions. They're going to take off really fast, really slow. They're going to stall the plane. They're essentially going to push this plane to the max for the just in case situations.
Yes, yes.
And knowing that the FAA has to certify every plane when it comes out, it's a process that takes forever. That's why they say like its first flight's going to be in 2026, with its hoping to have commercial passenger service in 2029. Now, that is a long time, but they do so many testings that they can write books and books and books and manuals, because every plane has to have a manual on
Yes.
how it runs, how it flies, how it does everything. And this is what they do. That's why it's taken a long time.
Understandable. You've answered a lot of really good questions and been incredibly informative. I do have, sorry, little horse. One more question before we get going that isn't considered related to hypersonic flight, just flight in general. Why are planes so worried about me getting a flotation device when I feel like a parachute is much more practical? I know you've had to go through the safety certifications and stuff like that, so you know, and I just personally don't.
Well, besides the fact that parachutes cost a lot of money,
Okay.
and we're also looking at like weight. So weight plays a big factor in aviation, and parachutes are heavy, believe it or not. And compared to a life jacket, it's much more. Life jackets are much more lighter, and it's better. And plus, with the pressurization of the plane, so when they close the door, they pressurize the cabin.
Yes.
In order for someone to open up the cabin door mid-flight, essentially you got to be Superman.
Yes,
open
yes,
it.
yes. Because of the pressure
'Cause-
difference.
Because of the pressure difference. And so that's why they don't put parachutes on it. Not, because they can't open the door, they can't do this, they can't do that. And honestly, it really is about weight and the fact that you can't open the door.
Yeah, like if you could open the door, it would make a lot of sense that you could jump. But since you can't open the door, might as well wait till the plane stops. And if you're somewhere wet, at least you float.
Exactly. That's why cabin crew and pilots and flight attendants, they go through months and months of training for that just in case moment. A lot of the airline industry is a just in case moment. That's why if you ever look at a handbook of a plane, they always have a checklist for what happens if the engine's out, what happened if this breaks, what happened if that breaks, or what happens if you end up in water. That's why
Mhm.
I'm always, even though for someone who you could have taken thousands of flights, but you just never know that it may happen. It's rare. It will probably never happen in your lifetime, but there's always a just in case moment.
Well, it's like anything else with travel. You have to expect unexpected. They say like cars are the most dangerous method of transportation. Nobody gets in their car and goes, "Oh, I'm probably going to get in an accident today," but it can happen, and it's nice to
Exactly.
know what to do in case. So that's actually awesome that so much safety precaution has been taken.
Exactly. What I also would like to kind of like give a little talk about is that, surprisingly or not, this plane is going to be built in America. The company Boom is opening up a big factory. It's a 65-acre factory out in Greensboro, North Carolina. So
Oh,
the
wow.
plane's going to be American made. And it's going to have a travel speed of 1.7, a Mach 1.7, being really, really fast.
Yes.
And the range, it's a good range. It has about, they say it's going to have about 4,888 nautical mile of range, which makes it, has a lot. It makes it that you can get practically anywhere without having to stop. And
Yeah,
for that
one
speed.
trip to anywhere.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, Jose, thank you so much for your time and answering all the questions.
My pleasure.
I don't have to say he was awesome because I know him personally. He was, but I don't have to say it. Honestly, Jose was very informative and also was very good at explaining things in a way that normal people can grasp, which is a big problem in the scientific community, actually. It's like listening to a foreign language for some because they use words and phrases so specific to their area of expertise. Well, everyone, that's all the time that we have for today. A big shout out once again to Mr. Volt and Jose for coming on and being interviewed. Make sure to thank your mail carrier today. And again, please give us a like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.